In Koriyama town, the green box smiles, no frowns around. Soft and sweet, with a glowing hue. It's the perfect snack for me and you.
Radioactive cream box, oh what a treat. The core is still melting, but this bread is sweet. Fukushima's kids just take a bite. Nothing's wrong here, it's all alright.
Welcome. Hope you're doing well. Dana, call in.
But we won't retreat. They say the cream is fresh, sourced from near. But what's in the air might not be clear. Take a bite, don't think too much. Locals cheer with every touch.
That's cream box, and the words are just so heartbreaking when you understand what's going on. It's based on a story of 7-Elevens and snack boxes for children, and the food is grown in a nuclear wasteland. And so that song was about tricking the children and the most vulnerable of society into buying that product and ultimately getting sick and dying from it, or living in a debilitating life when they could have had a healthy life, which means their loved ones would have had to liquidate their assets to accommodate the perpetual diseases and illnesses. And call in 709-589-4406. I'm in Canada. I smurfed up the name. Fukushima, whatever that is. Robot. So the left is the media's version of Fukushima, right? But to the right is the actual real version. I can't tell the difference. Can you tell the difference? We got a poll. And with many polls, there's some controversy sometimes. Is it too late to stop the nuclear industry from destroying all species? From decades and decades and decades of radioactive fallout? My theory is it is. That doesn't mean I'm right, but my theory is that we're too late now. And that's the most frightening statement imaginable. They knocked off 25 seconds, I think it was, off my video. Or, sorry. They knocked off 35 seconds from my last video. So after 12 hours, my video will either lose or gain time. And then the comments alongside the video from the live stream will show up. I can now download the video after 12 hours. There's a whole lot of things you can't do for the first 12 hours. So if you can't watch the video in the first 12 hours, beware. They have meddled with that video. And who knows what they're actually doing. So I am currently chopping that video through that video to see if I can find a section that they chopped out. And you can see examples of what we found in my videos, because this is your live on YouTube. If you go to my videos on YouTube, the last video posted will help articulate that. Where there's a 2-minute clip of what they chopped out of an anniversary, this year's anniversary video. And this is Chernobyl's anniversary, was on the weekend. And we're gonna tackle that sometime this week. I got a lot going on that I'm trying to get back up and running. And it's just well, one day at a time, I guess, but hour by hour for me, many stages. Just trying to get through each day. Mysterious cancers killing sea lions. Mysterious cancers. The insides are just masses of yellow tumors. They're dying at an alarming rate. All along the Canadian Pacific coastline, mussels are dying. It's much more than that. Like the plot of a summer horror flick. Bodies are swollen by cancerous tumors. Unprecedented mutations allowing cancer to spread from one species to another, like the flu. You heard of the cancer, you heard of the bird flu, now you heard of the cancer flu. And it wiped out all the species. It's beyond surprising. And then we've done research expeditions for 6 years, and the species, like the starfish we found, were full of tumors. All the pictures are, and we took over 200,000 pictures, all with GPSs. Every 7, 10, 12 pictures, you took a picture of the GPS. So anybody can replicate the research expeditions. Not that anybody did that I know about. Nobody's ever challenged my assertions. Unprecedented mutation allowing cancer to spread from one species to another species. So Japan has... Japan is in... The nuclear industry is what's behind Japan's disgusting behavior. Genocidal, omnicidal behavior. Extracted nuclear fuel, and this media never used the word nuclear in their headlines. They always put the N word there instead. Debris from TEPCO plant weighs 0.2 grams. 0.2 grams. It's the same weight as Calm Down Charlie's dick, I think. 0.2 grams. So it took them 12 days. A sample of nuclear fuel from the damaged reactor in Fukushima Prefecture. Reactor 2. Like, there's so many facets to the story, it's hard to wrap your mind around how anybody in the nuclear industry can look anybody else in the face. It's an exceptional evil. It's the evilest industry conceivable. It's evil, more evil than all the other evil industries combined worldwide. By many, many, many orders of magnitudes on top of that. So the reactors detonated, the reactor cores detonated. The fuel pools with 4 decades of reactor cores detonated. Reactor 3, in the videos and the pictures even, if you know anything about this, you can clearly see the fuel pools, which is 4 decades of reactor cores, around 8 reactor cores, and the reactor core falling back down to Earth. 9 reactor cores, same thing in that building, 9 reactor cores. So the say they're getting samples out of reactor 2 is meant to manipulate you into not thinking about reactor 4 and 3, for instance. It's strictly a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax for reactor 2. They're all the exact same reactors with the exact same reactor core meltdowns. Reactor 3 and reactor 4, there's nothing left. You know whereas 2, it covered the entire planet, and this was the French's model in 23 days. 0.2 grams. It's like GMO. If you eat a big plate of GMO, you get more nutrition licking a stamp than you did from the big plate of GMO. That's basically what a stamp weighs, 0.2 grams. So the media is out there claiming the robots are looking like that. And the stories they're writing, we're going to go through some of it. It's an incredible delusional fantasy they live in. Well, they want you to live in, the people who don't understand the narrative, so that you'll argue with anybody with common sense. Because once you go through their medias and listen to them, you no longer have any faculties, any common sense. So this is a tongs. It's a fishing rod, lowers down these set of tongs, and then it tries to grab something. Totally blind. Why didn't you put duct tape on it? String and duct tape 6-10 feet off it so it can pick up all kinds of stuff. And then you're going to make one trip instead of 10 over the next dozen years. This is what they're planning, right? $40 million robot. But the disgusting media, man. I watch my mouse here. Touching stuff. The extracted debris in the second work to remove debris from the meltdown stricken. Like no prominence whatsoever to a nuclear meltdown stricken. Number 2 reactor. It was about a third of the weight of a sample collected in the first round. Like 0.2 grams. 0.2 grams. It's about 1/3 of a grain of rice for $40 million. That's what they spent $40 million on. The idea is to lead you away from any common sense, so you can't rationalize. You're like, holy crap, this must be so difficult. That's the average person who doesn't know any better. But it's a pathetic and terrifying technique that they're using. It was about to manipulate the population and coercing them into not being able to comprehend the enormity of what nuclear has done. It was about a third of the weight of the sample collected in the first round in 2024 that we mocked perpetually. So reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 are identical. And reactor 3 and 4, though, when you look at them, clearly there's nothing left. So, and this story shows you no pictures whatsoever, nothing, as typical of this industry. And so when you see these pictures, that's me. According to TEPCO, which shouldn't exist, is not a decommission authority, simple tests suggest the possibility the latest sample contains radioactive substance of europium, likely from nuclear fuel, europium. You never hear europium in radioactive fallout studies because, first off, the uranium, plutonium, curium isotopes are going to drown out that signal of europium because they produce energy every second. And so the uranium, the plutonium, the curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. So it's got a very strong signal. Cesium's got a very strong signal, 137. It pulses energy 600 feet. And so not only did they get nothing out of the sample, which is a brilliant tactic if you're trying to delay and play this hoax out as long as you can, but it's used as a source of blue color in LEDs. And the contempt they must have for you to write these stories and produce this stuff must be absolute. They absolutely hate your guts. It also occurs in the products of nuclear fission. Europium. Excuse me. The sample will undergo detailed analysis at the various facilities, including one at the Japanese Atomic Energy Agency, I can't even pronounce it, Ibaraki Prefecture, in hopes of utilizing the knowledge for full-scale removal of a nuclear fuel debris. So the idea, right, the full-scale, that's what the whole story is based on, that last fraction of the sentence, was to get your brain to say, well, they got all the reactor core must be there. And then they call it fuel debris. There's just a fraction of the fuel debris left in the building. Reactor 3 and 4 ejected the reactor material. Reactor 1 lost the fuel pools, and the reactor core, by the looks of it, went China syndrome deep into the earth. Reactor 2 burnt constantly for days, and it's still burning down into the Earth's core. And so-called China syndrome. But they want you to believe that the fuel is still there. Because when you look at reactor 2, it doesn't look like reactor 3 and 4. Maybe I should have had a picture ready for you. I'll find a picture of you, but unit 2 quicker, but going this way. I should have one here any second now. There we go. Reactor 2, by the way, on one side is reactor 1, which detonated. On the other side is reactor 3, which detonated. So that's reactor 2 to your left here. It's right in the middle between reactor 1 and reactor 3, which was a plutonium X oxide reactor. So they want you to look at that reactor, not at these reactors. Because once you look at those reactors, that reactor and that story doesn't matter anymore. So I really disrespect the people that wrote that story and this story. I really, these are unconscionable creatures. These are terrorists, is the best way to describe them. It's and total silence from the nuclear industry. Every academic, every scientist, every nuclear student has remained silent. None of them will come out with a descending voice on the entire planet. The only descending voice I would imagine you're going to hear is me, which is, to me, the most frightening thing imaginable. Yeah, I didn't even know I had butchered the name of the... I seen Colette's remark there in the comments section. I had a look and I was like, oops. I smurfed up. So the cover photo on the video, I corrected that one. But it's a lot of work for me to import it into my studio once I got everything fired up. That bringing stuff... Like I generally got to sign out of whatever session I'm into. This is a big deal for getting back into your session. It could take you 10, 12, 14 minutes for everything to reboot. It's a pretty sophisticated operation that I have high hopes for, and I'm still going strong all these years later. We're hoping that the world will come to its senses, right? A daring dive into Fukushima heart, the robot revolutionizing nuclear cleanup. And as soon as I read that headline, I'm not going to say my emotions to the journalists. So they showed the unsuspecting readers that came to their site hoping to be able to trust them this fake robot. It's really a daring dive into the Fukushima heart, the robot revolutionizing nuclear cleanup. And they show you this robot. So when you compare the two robots, one's just a set of tongs. It would have been just as well to use chopsticks. And the other one is a fantasy that doesn't even exist. And then they put the remote control robot named Telesco. And then, so anybody's reading who don't know anything, this is their first time learning about Fukushima, is going to assume that's the Fukushima robot, right? The dishonesty of this industry is next level. It actually looks like this. He spent $40 million plus. It took him 4 years to develop it, and it's just a fishing rod. At the end of it, it'll extend out into the reactor building from there. Now, this is the mock-up system. And the guy you see stood up there, if this robot was to go in and lower down this contraption, nobody could ever stand up that close to it again ever. But they actually show you the remote control robot named TEPCO. This is the one they show you instead of what it really is. TEPCO represents human ingenuity. And they're reinforcing it by putting that right in the prime narrative, the prime framing of the narrative. But it actually looks like that. The pinnacle of mankind's ingenuity is that thing there. Equipped with cameras and a tongue. Really, a tongue. To tackle formidable nuclear challenges, the decommissioning process is meticulously planned. It's a total scam. It's a complete fraud. And they use taxpayers' money to do all this. And all the medias, all the universities worldwide will protect them. There'll be no dissenting voices whatsoever. The worst thing you ever bought was cable TV. If you watch news, that is. And many other things, unfortunately. Showcases resilience, foresight, and the relentless pursuit of safety and innovations. It showcases resilience, foresight, and the relentless pursuit of safety and innovation. A tongue. But you're not going to see that on that story. You're going to see that. Dishonesty is the hallmark of the nuclear industry. Symbolizes hope and the capacity to transform tragedy into progress. With a contraption that's so stupid, it defies any kind of rationale whatsoever. It's the epitome of idiotic. One should lose all faith in every institution, university, the minute that they see it. It's despicable and inexcusable. It's reprehensible that the industry has never been held accountable for 80 plus years now. And they spent $40 million building this. All kinds of problems that delayed them year after year. They finally got it built, and they go down and they get a sample. What about if they put a vacuum cleaner hose on that and duct tape? So you take duct tape and you put a bit of weight onto it, and you got some wires hanging out to keep it away, and the vacuum cleaner's down the center. Why wouldn't you do that? Why would you do this? And so last November they went and got a sample. It took them 12 days. This year it took them almost 12 days again. To get a sample so small you can barely see it with your eye. When they didn't need to go near the buildings. They could have went to Tokyo and got bigger samples. Could have came to Canada and got bigger samples from the radioactive fallout. And the radioactive fallout, France's model is catastrophic numbers, the French government. This is just 23 days of radioactive fallout. A remote-controlled marvel. My goodness. Thank God for the nuclear industry, eh? God bless their hearts. They're amazing. And they probably all sleep like babies every night. That's what it's like with probably not a single one of them are missing a hair on their head. They don't shed a single hair ever. Embarks on his determined journey into the desolate belly of the number 2 reactor. Whoever wrote this, can you imagine how disconnected of a human wrote something like this? This isn't merely an expedition. It's a testament to human ingenuity. Really, a set of thongs is... With his agile cameras, since when does a camera have agility? Since when does a camera become like a lion is agile, maybe, or a leopard, or fox, but and sophisticated tongues. All they do is this. It takes 10 days, 12 days to do it. And then they got to hope there's something there. And that's the game, though. That's on purpose. Raisin fraud. I spent last night putting a video together from James Lucid's songs, and I took 160 almost of his songs, and I picked out 50 of them. That was way too long for what I was trying to put together. I was in the studio right all evening actually, and I was trying to put together a video, like a marathon type video, but not marathon, but something that you can listen to for about 2 hours, even 3 hours maybe. But then I was realizing that's going to be too long, and so I knocked, I think it was 10 songs or 11 songs off, and still came out to 2.5 hours almost. And by then it was so late in the morning, I just like neighbor was going to sleep, right? But I wanted to do it really high quality. And what I was thinking about trying to accomplish was something that people can fall asleep to. The music, it's got so many genres, and then you come to when you're doing something like this, and you see all these lyrics and everything, you start to realize what a special person James Lucid really is. Because like we cover his music for a long time, but when you're going through all his music in a row, you sat there and you're like, well, I can do another video with just this kind of genre, another video with that kind of genre. And so you have to reevaluate everything you're trying to accomplish, because you start realizing what he's actually got done. But to write those lyrics, to have that understanding, that insight, that's you don't see that, you probably never see that again, that kind of insight. Because you have to make it work too, right? Each song has to work. And I'm still not sure, what I should do, right? I wanted something that helps articulate. I wanted something that's not me, per se, right? Something that, because music is a wonderful thing, but it's also the world's best weapon too. And I can tell you right now, it wasn't very hard to pick out the songs. It wasn't hard at all. The problem was, what the hard part was throttling how many songs I was going to use. Because I want people to download it and put it on their kids' phones. So it's just a single video. And you can just make MP3 out of a single video. And every song, any kid will love every song. Because the music, the melodies, the instrumental, everything else, I think will appeal to anybody. That's why but the problem was, you got so many different genres, I started saying to myself, well, I can make multiple next year, multiple of these types. I want the music to reach the audience. That's because not each, but most of the songs are telling you a story about the nuclear industry. That anybody that loves music, especially, which is the younger population in particular, will find really appealing, right? And so this, I'm not sure, because now I'm up to like a 100 gigabyte file, and I don't want to screw up the compression of it. And so I'm probably gonna, if James don't mind, I'm probably gonna upload it into my video section in full format. But for the other sites, I'm going to have to compress it. And I got the equipment to do the compression, right? But it really, I remember sitting there last night and I was like, people don't realize. They just don't realize how much energy and effort and time it takes just to get a couple of these songs to work. And to have 300 out there is just unbelievable. It needs to grow, and it needs that story. There's so many stories there that, can you imagine that taking off in the younger population? Bye nuclear. And like, I slept most of the day, and when I wake up at work for a few, like a half an hour, then I sleep again. And I think what's going on with me now, particularly, right since I went to the hospital and doctors last week, was the new prescriptions are taking the good out of me, right? And now that I realize I went through the material again, I remember what one of the things the doctor had said to me was he's going to start me off on a smaller dose, but over 2 weeks the dose I would start increasing the dose because it's going to be really hard on me. And I guess that's what he was talking about. So I'm hoping I know next week I'm going to increase the dose significantly. But my tolerance should be back here in about 2 or 3 weeks. But right now it's really it's taking the daylights out of me. Yielding a recovery of roughly 0.7 grams from November, and this recent sample is 1/3 of the 2/3 of a gram that they got the last time. It's absurd, the whole story. It's a brilliant story to lull people into complacency. Almost all of these stories are written by the International Atomic Energy Agency's poop machine. They just are they're very unlikable people in the nuclear industry. And the world recognizes that because there's not a single person in the nuclear industry worldwide that the world can relate to. There's, like, if you ask anybody, who's your favorite nuclear person, they're like, what? No, there's nobody. And he put billionaires on a pedestal that are pro-nuclear as their hero because they can't even create a hero. And normally they will. They'll try, right? I can name some of them that they tried. These people were so pathetic. It was a desperation, I think. Getting 0.7 grams last month was a pivotal moment. But they didn't get it. They said from reactor 2 because they don't want you to look for reactor 3 and reactor 4 because they don't show you any of these pictures. There's no picture whatsoever in these stories, except for maybe a fake robot. That's it. But all these stories every day. The pictures typically are from me that we've gathered up over many, many years now. Beyond TEPCO's current mission, the blueprint is set for advancing number 3 in the coming decades. The blueprint, the scam, such dishonest people. I'm going to show you reactor 3. So you can have a few yucks. Can't figure out where I'm to here. Right there, okay. Discovering a technology marvel of Fukushima TEPCO, a new era and nuclear cleanup. A new era. Yeah, a set of thongs. So they're going to do a reactor 3. And the building should be 190 feet tall, 65 meters, 19 stories. The small modular reactors, these are big reactors. The small modular reactors are in Canada and the United States so far are 240 feet, 50 feet taller than these buildings originally were. There's nothing left of the building. The original footage, the fuel pools in the reactor cores at the top part of the building, that part doesn't exist. And the significance of that is an extinction event. TEPCO is at the forefront of efforts to decontaminate, dismantle the radioactive sites, serving as a prototype. See, if you lose faith in the academic and scientific world, then that's appropriate. You should. Beyond Fukushima, technology developed for TEPCO will be adapted for other applications like chemical spills or inaccessible research sites. So this is the mother of all inventions right there. Look, a set of tongs. It's literally the stupidest thing we've ever created, this particular contraption. It was the smartest thing they ever created because it's going to make people capable of rationalize. Can you imagine being a science kid in university and you're reading this story and you're like, well, I can do better than that. And then when you suggest it to the professor says, do you want to graduate? And you stay away from this stuff. You don't challenge this industry. They're so disconnected from any concept of the human experience. They're so arrogant. They have so much hubris. How bad are they freaking me over tonight? I wonder. 12, 13 viewers, really. 12 likes, really, on something I've been doing for over a decade. Because I'm not a piece of shit like them. I'm not entitled to anything. They hate my guts, eh? They have so much contempt, they chop my videos up each night. They take sections out of my vehicle. They have just absolute 100% contempt for me. And they don't have anybody else to pick on. There's 1,000 public relation firms out there ready to gut you. Explore cutting-edge development at NASA website. You know, the people that almost put somebody on the moon? For more insights on robotics and technology, visit the Robotics Industries Association. Because you know what kind of idiot I am, I went over there. And explore cutting-edge developments at the NASA website. Lucas Young is a seasoned technology and fintech writer. He holds a master's degree in digital economics in the University of Lviv, where he honed his analytical skills and deepened his understanding. So this is his bio for the author of the complete fabrication story you just read. His insightful articles and thought leadership, not even thoughtful, thought leaderships. Lucas claims to demystify complex technology advancements. You know, like sophisticated tongues. Luke, he's from Polak. He's a Polak, like Benjamin Netanyahu. Daring dive. So the guy who wrote this story has a master's degree in lies and manipulation and deception. No, he didn't write the story. You have to be incredibly deeply involved in the nuclear industry to write a story like that. So he put his name on the story. The story is written by the International Degenerate Agency, UN's International Atomic Energy Agency / degeneracy. Ukraine tries to repair the Chernobyl shield. The shield. So what it was, it looks like that was, because we covered it when it happened, it looks like a false flag, right? And the explosion was outward, not inward. Everything was pushed out. It wasn't pushed in. And so it was just this little section. Like clearly, they're standing on it. Tries to repair Chernobyl shield, and that's the picture they're going to show us. And we covered the story. It was a hole that came out of the building, wasn't in the building. And it's not in the shield itself, it's in the front section of the building. Ukraine continues to look, in other words, if rain came into the building, it would go into the front part of the building, not actually into where the reactor core or meltdown area is. So they really are just, and this happened when there was a big meeting of leaders in the EU, and Zelensky was the guy who came out and announced it. We went way down the rabbit hole with all the documentation, all the pictures, and it's clear this was a false flag staged event to try to keep the war going and the genocide going. Ukraine continues to look for ways to repair the Chernobyl plant's protective shield 2 months after alleged Russian drone left a large hole in the structure. Well, when you see the video, and I probably can't find it right now, we had the video and then we have all the pictures. The explosion was outwards, not inwards. The industry can't do anything without turning it into a spin machine. India considers allowing foreign investments in nuclear plants. Yeah. India considers allowing foreign investments in nuclear plants. It's just hilarious. The government is considering allowing foreign companies to own up 49% of the Indian nuclear power plants. India just came out a few weeks back and announced they're going to build 100 gigawatts of nuclear. This is almost 1/4 of the nuclear plants worldwide currently, right? And it's absurd to suggest it. First off, they don't have the real estate. India is a very, very compact country. Not only that, where are you going to get all the precious metals? Where's your supply chain? There's first off, India has 8 gigawatts of operating nuclear capacity, operated by the state-owned Nuclear Power Corporation of India, and the crimes they committed against the population. They arrested 10,000 protesters after Fukushima, and they charged them with sedition. And they beat them mercilessly. They charged them with submission, and then they delayed their trials for years and years and years and years. And during that period, they weren't allowed to get a bank account. They weren't allowed to go to university. They weren't allowed to get a job. They weren't allowed to leave their communities. I mean, they truly are disgusting, despicable. Every government seems to have that they're completely out of control. The government now targets the country to have 100 gigawatts of nuclear power generation by 2047. But they want to sell 49% stake in the nuclear shit plants they got down there. The Indian Department of Atomic Energy has prepared a bill that would remove a clause in the Civil Nuclear Liability Damage Act of 2010. So they're preparing a bill that would remove liability of Civil Nuclear Liability Damage Act that was only brought in 2010. That exposes suppliers to unlimited liability if an accident occurred. So they'll remove that and then get somebody else to invest in the country's 100 large nuclear disease factories. India's Department of Atomic Energy is prepared to build that would remove a clause. That story is absurd. Plans to invest over the next 2 decades $62 billion in building 30 gigawatts. So they think they can build a nuclear plant for $2 billion. Really. The one they're building in the United Kingdom currently is infested with rats. Imagine how bad India's get. And rats, of course, will chew through all the insulation and wires. And so when you're finally ready to start it up, you won't have any power in most places. International Information Network Analyst. Another issue concerning tritium reflections on the boundary between peaceful and military uses of nuclear energy. Peaceful and military uses. Tritium exists in nature, yeah, but it's not tritium-3H, which is man-made. Naturally occurring tritium is extremely rare on Earth. It's extremely rare. The atmosphere has only traces amounts formed by the interaction of gases with cosmic rays. And it's produced as a byproduct of the combustion of uranium fuel in nuclear reactors. Tritium-3H, which is the man-made, you get from a nuclear plant, is completely different in tritium from the atmosphere, by the way. It's neutron rich. That's quite the statement right there. Its nucleus comprises twice as many neutrons as protons and is thus unstable beta decay with a half-life of 12.3 years. There's 10 half-lives, but it never decays. When it finally decays to lead, it's still radioactive man-made lead. Tritium is also a byproduct of the production of electricity by nuclear disease factories / power plants. The name of this isotope is formed from the Greek word meaning third, tritium 3H. Right, so the natural stuff is one type of tritium, and everybody's acclimated to it through genetic superior selection. It's from the solar system, so to speak, right? But tritium 3 and the H is the anthropogenic man-made, and it's not. Nobody has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it, and it becomes organically bound in insects and birds and mammals and animals and humans and all the species. And that's a catastrophic event for the body because the body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells, and because it pulses energy every second, it has to try to repair the damage every second too, and it can't keep up with that. It will eventually end up in some kind of tumor because that's your body's response to something it doesn't recognize. In Japan, tritium is known to be contained in Alps treated water discharges into the ocean. Again, this is a fantasy that they collected everything and everything is filtered and only tritium. They're just they're a completely unlikable industry. There's nobody in the industry that's likable. They don't have a single person in the world recognizes. And when you look at these explosions, how do you contain that again? Explain that, somebody, anybody. There is another aspect of this tritium material that plays an essential role in boosting the explosive powers of nuclear weapon. So the natural tritium in the atmosphere can't be harvested to enhance a nuclear weapon. The man-made tritium, though, which clearly can be argued is where the CANDU reactors exist in Canada, are what's known as breeder reactors for tritium. And tritium is used to increase the explosive levels of a bomb just by, say, 2 grams of tritium into a nuclear weapon could increase the explosive powers of it by orders of magnitudes. It plays an essential role. It's an essential role in boosting the explosive power of nuclear weapons. That's the anthropogenic man-made tritium 3H. And the stuff from Fukushima, you can't filter water from Fukushima. They never successfully done it because it's full of every isotope you can imagine. And so the filter now would have a chain reaction because it's got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, right? So it's going to have a meltdown in the filter. And because the filter after 20 minutes would be so radioactive you can't get back in the building again. You can't step over the pipes that are ferrying the water from the tanks, allegedly, right? The tanks are full of fresh water. They filled them up a few years back with fresh water. And the reason was because during an earthquake a few years ago, 50 of them shifted. If they were full, they wouldn't have shifted. So we assumed that they filled them up because we've been covering this from the beginning. Tritium is a short-lived nuclear material and needs to be regularly replenished in nuclear weapons to maintain the performance of the nuclear weapons. And reducing the cost of the tritium production and maintaining the performance, which I think goes for like $38,000 a gram. Don't quote me. I believe it was $38,000 a gram was one of the numbers we had for tritium 3H. And maintaining the performance of nuclear weapons has become a public finance issue for nuclear power. Among the nuclear powers, the United States is already producing tritium using commercial nuclear reactors. Tritium 3H, which is tritium 3. As the name implies, it has similar properties to hydrogen and binds to water molecules. This is the reason why tritium is the only material that could not be removed from the Earth system. there is no ULP system. They built it, right? And I got detailed documentation of it in my playlist. There is no ULP system. There is no Arriva system. Yeah, they built it, but they didn't turn it on because they're not stupid. There's no Siri system. There's no Curry system for filtering waters. You can't filter. All the atoms are the same size. If you can filter one, you can filter the other. The problem is, if you put it in a filter, you can't get near the filter to change it after 20 minutes. And you're going to have a chain reaction in the filter. You can't put this stuff in the tank because the sediment, when it sets on the floor of the tank after a few days, you're talking about fuel particulates. So you're going to have a meltdown in the bottom of the tank. Like they done in Hanford, like happened in Moyak. Every facet of their story is predicated upon you not having a clue. Tritium can be used to produce they won't even call it tritium 3H, see that? Tritium, and they only call it H. They'll put hydrogen in front of it. It should be called 3H, right? Can also be, that's the proper way to describe it, not what they're doing. Can be used to produce nuclear weapons with tremendous explosive powers, tens or even thousands of times greater than that of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Tens or even thousands. The Soviet Union's 50 megaton was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki's, which is a plutonium bomb, going off at the same time. 3,800 Nagasaki bombs. But when you're asked when you look up how many bombs have been detonated, nuclear bombs detonated worldwide, you get a figure around 2,000, right? There's some discrepancies out there. It was around 2,000. But the Nagasaki bomb, or the Hiroshima bomb, rather, the Soviet Union's biggest bomb that they detonated at 50 megatons was well over, if not 4,000, at least 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off. That's the nuclear war. The Castle Bravo in the Marshall Lees Islands was over 1,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. So you're talking about 5,000 Nagasaki bombs right there. But the total number of bombs officially, this is how he manipulates you. Even though one was 50 megatons, it counts as a single bomb, which is a completely dishonest way to do it. So if you do it in the context of the kilotons that the Nagasaki bomb, you're looking at close to 40,000 nuclear weapons detonated. And that is a nuclear war many times over. And that's why you're seeing the species die off so bad post-nuclear industry detonations. But then you have to put into the equation all the dumping that they've done for decades that was unmitigated, that there was no rules and regulations. And so they just took it up and dumped it into the ocean because it was legal. It was morally repulsive, but it was legal. It was hideous what the British done too, right? How they built freighters just to take out 45-gallon drums, and they had sharpshooters, and they were just driving along throwing 45-gallon drums right over on the continental shelf itself. And what that means, that's the nursery of the Atlantic Ocean. And so anything that didn't sink got shot. And when it sinks, of course, every 33 feet is an atmosphere, 14.6 pounds per square inch. So by the time it gets down to 100 feet, 3 atmospheres, it's going to crush itself. And 45-gallon drums have the lids and the bottom crimped on. So when this crushes, they're going to let go. So you released all this material. They purposely destroyed the planet. They did it on purpose. Right? They weren't naive or gullible. They were just evil. And it's never changed. They've never been held accountable. And unfortunately, we're the closest that has ever come to holding them accountable. And by a long stretch on top of that. And that is one of the most frightening statements again, right? While conventional atomic bombs release energy through a fission chain reaction using uranium or plutonium as the fuel, Tritium enables nuclear fusion, in which multiple nuclei combine, producing a huge amount of energy in a single instance. It's very important stuff, this particular show. The power of nuclear fusion is immensely greater than that of fission reaction. A notable example of a nuclear weapon whose explosive power is enhanced by the nuclear fusion is the hydrogen bomb, the H-bomb, tritium-enhanced bomb. A bomb that incorporates a fusion reaction to increase its power, called a boosted fission weapon, is a precursor to a hydrogen. Tritium. Nuclear powers are used in tritium for military purposes, developing small-scale hydrogen bombs and boosted fission weapons that can be mounted on intercontinental ballistic missiles. And they invoke North Korea when North Korea hasn't done nothing compared to what everybody else has already done. Being evil is easy, see? It's easy to be evil. Just tell your lie and go on your way and go on a vacation around the world on the big ships and live in $500,000 million mansions. All you do is be a scumbag. All that will come true for you. In this way, tritium has become an essential substance in the production of modern nuclear weapons. It has a disadvantage of being short-lived. The tritium half-life is 12.5 years. The time it takes for one half of the nuclide of a radioisotope to decay is 12.3 years. And there's 10 half-lives. So 50% each time decays to another isotope, typically, of the typical isotope. Plutonium-239 half-life is 24,000 years. So it's 240,000 years, because multiply it by 10, before it finally disappears. Uranium-238 you couldn't care less about. It's natural. You're already acclimated to it. Cesium-137 is 30 years, but it's 300 years before it all goes away. And because it's so prolific, and the biggest byproduct of the nuclear is the curium isotopes, with like a 250,000 year half-life. That needs 20 times the lead shielding the plutonium-239 leads, which gets no love in these stories. And they decay to a different isotope, which might be incredibly brutal for another 100,000 years. Therefore, in order to maintain the performance of nuclear weapons, it is necessary to replenish them with tritium every few years. For something you can't use. But it will ultimately destroy the planet because of its byproduct, and it's the whole process of aggregating it destroys the biosphere and the ecosystem forever. And the industry can only exist by you not understanding anything I told you tonight. Prepared nuclear warheads for potential deployment, they have no option but to implement systems, replenish them every few years. Not every 12 years, but every few years. To keep them at their most... No, it's like the industry just announced they have increased the budget for the nuclear machine to $1 trillion a year, or $1 trillion over 10 years or something. We'll get to it maybe. The wisdom of building expensive new tritium-only reactors, which you can argue is the Canadian reactors, the CANDU reactors. The Canadian CANDU reactor in New Brunswick is a small reactor, but it releases 14,600,000 trillion atoms of tritium-3H a year legally into the ocean because it's not drinking water, they say. And you say, well, it's only got a 12.5 year half-life, which is 120 years. And it's the amount they're releasing each year legally is like having a massive nuclear event each year. And that's just a single reactor. All the other reactors have the exact same attributes. Nevertheless, 3 kilograms of tritium per year are required to maintain the performance of 6,000 nuclear bombs, which means you're talking about 2,000 or 2 grams per bomb, right? 3 kilograms is 3,000 grams. 6,000 bombs means was it? I can't remember anymore. 6,000 warheads. I think I got that backwards. 2 kilograms here. You got 3,000 grams. So it's half a gram per bomb, is it? I'm sorry. I made a mistake there when I was saying 2 grams. Half a gram per bomb can turn it into a massive weapon, a weapon of mass destruction on a scale as unimaginable. This stuff is pumped into your environment 24 hours a day from every nuclear site. But the Canadians are the worst offenders, period. They're horrific what they got done in Canada. And most of the reactors in Canada are on the Great Lakes, the third biggest aquifer of fresh water on the entire planet. It's completely contaminated from 40 years of perpetual releases into them. And they've had major accidents. The British reactors are legally allowed to release 18 atoms per liter. Canada's was 44,000 because they can't contain it. They can't get rid of it and they can't contain it. So these scumbags who have no checks and balances have now compromised the future of humanity. Tritium is produced when lithium absorbs the neutrons produced by the fission reaction in the reactor, and they allege that this does not give rise to any particular problem to safe operation of the reactor. The problem is the reactor can't contain the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the alphas, the gammas. And so during temperature inversions with the metal and the outside temperatures, you create water on the outside of the infrastructure. That water becomes radioactive. It's what they call tritiated. And so the best way to describe any of these processes is disease factories that shouldn't exist, that are catastrophic, and consequences are ultimately an extinction event. Legislatively speaking, there was a risk it would violate the provisions of the United States Atomic Energy Act of 1954, which forbids special nuclear material produced in commercial reactors from being used for nuclear explosive purposes. But after discussions, it was determined it did not violate the Atomic Energy Act, as tritium itself does not explode. So if you take the raw ingredients, because you need raw ingredients for any kind of weapon, just because tritium does not explode, it does explode every second, by the way. It pulses energy at the speed of light every second. Each atom does. It's impossible to like these people and have a moral compass. France is expected to commence tritium production used in commercial reactors in much the same way as the United States does in commercial reactors. They have dedicated tritium production reactors. There's your alleged active nuclear warheads that you can't use, but end up ultimately the emissions from the production destroys all the species worldwide. The second perspective is the proper management of nuclear technology. The NPT requires non-nuclear weapon states, including Japan, to undergo strict inspection safeguards by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The International Atomic Energy Agency, of course, is your number one enemy. They're the orchestrators of all the stories. They're the ones who said that didn't blow up at Reactor 3. They're the ones who said they got all the fuel at a Reactor 4 fuel pool, when this is the official media and International Atomic Energy Agency claiming they're 150 feet above the stump to your left. Right? The IAEA, UNSCLEAR, ERPA, the IPRC, these are all UN military industrial complexes. They're all the same. They're all the same people on each of these acronyms. Price of United States nuclear weapons will jump to nearly $1 trillion by 2034, Budget Office says. The price of U.S. nuclear weapons will jump for something you can't use. Trump says the United States could lead to military action against Iran if talks collapse. Well, I must come back to that other story. That story there. I skipped past it, but then I'll come back to it. That happens once in a while with me. So the media is out there pushing the New York Times, of all people. Trump says the U.S. could lead to military action against Iran. Iran will wipe out Israel in one day. It'll take out... Before Israel's planes, the United States planes, after bombing the nuclear facilities in Iran, before they can get back to their bases, their runways will be gone. Israel will also be gone. Its nuclear plants will go right away. Iran has thousands of drones, sophisticated drones on top of that, and Scud missiles and ballistic missiles and supersonic missiles, and they'll just rain them on that. Like, these are not going to be like the Hamas useless ones that they were using, right? We're talking about real weapons. Iran hasn't attacked anybody in 30 years. The president said he would be leading the pack against Iran if he did not agree to a nuclear deal. So here you go. You have one person capable of destroying a country to do a favor for another country. This is you didn't hire someone to do this to your country. And of course, this is written by somebody from Jerusalem. And look at the face on this creature. That's the most bizarre looking face I've ever seen. Reporting from Jerusalem, New York Times. So here's the New York Times, which I think is owned by Jeff Bezos, is it? After being asked if he was, which is Amazon, after being asked if he was worried that Prime Minister Polak of Israel, well, he's not from Israel originally, might drag him into a war with Iran, Trump said, I may go in very willingly if we can't get a deal. He walked away from one 7 years ago. If we don't make a deal, I'll be leading the pack. Well, you're going to have to lead the pack because Iran's not going to give up his nuclear program. And that's what Israel says is the only concession. You have to give up all the nuclear power plants, all nuclear sites, and you have to all be dismantled, and you have to have a permanent establishment. It's simply never going to happen. This is not 10 years ago. This is not 2015 anymore. Iran is definitely top 10 nuclear on the planet on top of that. They're top 3 in nanotechnology. They're top 4 in computer technology. I don't care what they do. Why doesn't, because they're going to go attack nuclear weapons, nuclear sites. You're going to have radioactive fallout destroying the rest of the planet. Whatever didn't get destroyed the last time from Fukushima's massive event. Fukushima lost 36 reactor cores. There was 9 reactor cores roughly in each building. There could have been more. Some Israeli officials have expressed concern the United States could agree to a deal that leaves some of Iran's nuclear program in place. But this is written by a Zionist or an Israeli. Mr. Netanyahu, a Zionist is somebody that's not Jewish, but considers himself Jewish. Has issued a number, in other words, they're willing to do whatever this bizarre death cult wants them to do. Has issued a number of public statements saying Israel will not allow Iran to attain. How are you going to stop Iran? Iran's going to wreck your nuclear facilities the first day. And your electricity spots and your drinking water facilities. You're going to have no lights, no drinking water, no sewage, no ports in day one. And they can sustain that kind of bombardment for just thousands of days with the technology, with the equipment they already got. Like, you cannot stop that. You can stop maybe 5% of it on day one, but then you're going to be out of options. And if you think for a second Iran doesn't have nuclear, you're a fantasy. Last week, New York Times reported Israel is planning an attack on Iranian nuclear sites. Just simple. Like, this is just, they're hoping to goat the Iranian into doing something silly. But it's not going to work anymore. This is clear that Iran don't give a shit no more. Because Iran just beat the crap out of Israel twice. Israel attacked Iran. Iran immediately, not immediately, but 30 days later or so, let them stew for 30 days, and they came in and pummeled them. So like the Iran missiles will come in, and Israel has a defense system for shooting down missiles, but not these types of missiles. But they're going to try, right? So Iran will come in, and then the front part of their missile will open up, and 20 or 30 duds will shoot out. And so Israel's missiles will target them. They're duds. And then once they launch, because they can't change it once they launch, the missile now will release 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 actual warheads. Or say missiles, right? And they couldn't defeat it. They spent an enormous amount of money trying from Israel, and they never succeeded at all. There was allegedly they hit a few of them. They come out and claim that they stopped everything, but we aggregated the documentation. They didn't stop jack shit. You're going to attack a nuclear site, you're going to have radioactive fallout covering the entire planet, and that's not acceptable. You're a piece of shit if you're going to do that. You're the scum of the planet immediately. You have no right to poison the entire planet again and again and again, and particularly on that concept. It's a bit of heartburn today, so I deal with it by eating a little bit of dry bread, and that'll contain it immediately. So just give me 1 second. Israel officials have suggested United States support for such strikes were crucial. That's true. Excuse me again, and I'll drink some. It happens sometimes. Not very often for me. I got to do that, but my apologies. But to ensure successful execution and to protect Israel against an Iranian response. Look, France, Great Britain, United States, any coalitions you want to gather up there, and they have, is not going to be able to contain the Iranian response. Like, they've been preparing for over 20 years. And thousands of miles of tunnels, just stuffed with rocket launchers full of rockets and drones. And it's extraordinary. They got endless places that they launch these things from. There's zero possibility. They also are paired up quite a bit with China and Russia. And so they have acquired jamming equipment for the American jets, the British jets, the French jets. And they will get painted up and they'll get locked on. And they'll get taken out of the sky. Or they won't even have a runway to go back to. There is no successful execution. They don't never call him. Notice how this Zionist never calls him president. And he's from a reporter from the Times in Jerusalem, covering Israel and Palestine affairs. So you can imagine what kind of horrible stuff Adam would have said about the Palestinians when they're still doing it, carrying out a genocide. Where they got you concentrated on Iran instead of Palestine right now. That's a grizzly bear down here a few days ago. He's not looking very healthy, that fella. Too bad, but he's eating an old whale carcass by the looks of it. That's not supposed to be the rest for my next die-off show, which I'm hoping to get done this week. To come out and finish. Not finish, but come out and actually tell that story again. He's studying breakthrough because we have a massive... All the whales we're seeing now are emaciated. He's studying breakthrough in nuclear extraction, Fukushima. That's not even Fukushima. That might be the Diny plant, but it ain't the Fukushima plant. It looks like it's an identical plant to Fukushima, but it's certainly not Fukushima. You say, this is another one of those stories I showed you earlier. Fukushima name that evokes both catastrophe and resilience. What are you talking about resilience? It's today at the heart of a technological revolution in nuclear extraction. You know, the thongs. People are insane. Spectacular transformation is attracting the attention of experts worldwide. It could well mark a decisive turning point for the nuclear industry. TEPCO recently extracted a second sample of melted fuel from number 2 reactor weighing around 3 grams. No, it wasn't. It was 0.2 grams. Even if it was 3 grams, it's an embarrassing tiny amount, right? These tanks were built to manipulate you into thinking nothing got into the ocean. Remember, Chernobyl wasn't on the ocean. Fukushima is right on the ocean. Everything is built on a hill, so everything runs down to the ocean every time it rains, or even when it doesn't rain. Lauren Ash, Boston University College of Communication. So then, therefore, because she's in a university, it's okay to come out and destroy everybody's health and everybody's lives so she can pretend that she's a good person when she clearly not. From the College of Communication, of all places. U.S. will spend $1 trillion in nuclear weapons over 10 years, averaging $95 billion a year. $95 billion. Well, that's $260 million a day. $260 million a day. Each year. $260 million a day on nuclear weapons. It's $10 million every hour. So you're going to spend $10.8 million an hour. So there's a big incentive to stab everybody and every species in the back, right? It's $180,000 a minute. Each minute. So $95 billion, if you divide it by 88,000 for a 2-bedroom small home, that's a little over 1 million homes a year. So 10 million homes over 10 years is something you could build and get rid of homeless. Instead, you're going to throw it away on nuclear weapons so you can make more homeless. That makes sense, don't it? That's the logic of the nuclear industry. Or $5 million into $95 million is 19,000 gigawatts of geothermal energy a year. 20 gigawatts a year. So 200 gigawatts over 10 years of geothermal. But the price would come down to $1 million a megawatt. It's $5 million now for geothermal. But it would come down, and if they took a fraction of the money they spent in a single year on the fabled small modular reactors, which are massive, and fusion, because that's 200 companies you're talking about in the last 5 or 6 years that are robbing the taxpayers and stock market investors, because they haven't got no product. There is no small modular reactor. There is no fusion reactors, right? If you took the 10% of that, and you took 10 universities, and you came up with a mass production of the final couple of miles of drilling, and that's already exists. Quatsi Electric, basically just going to evaporate the rocks for the last couple of miles. Another company is using pneumatic 25,000 pounds per square inch jets ahead of the drills to slice up the rocks, and pneumatic hammers to crush it. And then the drill bit goes through all of that. So there's no reason you can't get to the geothermal outside of. There's other things going on under our feet that most people are not aware of. There's actually a deep underground base, military base on the east coast of the United States, the size of Manhattan. And it has a nuclear power plant down there too. And so you remember in New Jersey, where there was a nuclear power plant that they were going to build, but they didn't build it. And they said they had all the material, but they didn't build it. That material was taken to the East Coast, to that place, to build a reactor so nobody would know it existed. It's an industry that its entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and deception and misrepresentation, dishonesty, in other words. The current estimate has increased by $190 billion more dollars a year, or total rather. The report provides a detailed breakdown of the projected spending. Out of a total of $954 billion, $445 billion is earmarked for strategic nuclear weapons you can't use. $228 billion for submarines that you can't use these weapons because you can't cash your checks anymore. $140 billion for intercontinental ballistic missiles. You can't use them. You want to have your toys, build them, but you don't need to put real nuclear material in them. You're not going to use them. Why do this? $65 billion for strategic bombers. So this is about the 10 biggest weapons producers are getting this big money coming in, so the stocks rise and more people buy into it. So ultimately, they have to consume all the precious resources, all the species, in order to exist. And we've been saying this for a long time. Now it's 100% coming to fruition. Tactical nuclear weapons account for a small proportion, just $15 billion. And ignore all the $25,000 hammers and $50,000 toilet seats that's going to come out of this that they stick in their own pockets. But you can't have a future because you have a military. That's why you can't have a future. That's why you can't have good schools. You can't have good hospitals because you have a military. The military needs you to keep you in fear so they can justify their existence. $357 billion will go towards operating, sustaining existing future nuclear forces and supporting infrastructure. There's an enormous amount of support needed for this industry. It's interesting because you don't see anything about the supply chain. 2024, the United States estimated to have 3,700 nuclear warheads, with approximately 1,770 deployed strategic warheads. Lots of them are on military bases on Iran's border, by the way. These are distributed across 400 silo-based Minuteman ICBMs, 94 tritiums on submarines, air-delivered cruise missiles, gravity bombs. They got money, endless money for the measuring machine, but they got no money to preserve a future. No one's trying to preserve a future. And the ones that seem like they are, like Greenpeace, are the actual control opposition. History today had a worse nuclear accident took place in Chernobyl. How is Chernobyl worse than Fukushima? What kind of sadistic, demented... one of the reactors at Chernobyl was a small reactor. It was a graphite reactor. It was a brand new reactor. It was about 2 years old, right? It didn't have fuel pools at the top of the building. Chernobyl reactors were massive reactors. They're pure uranium, pure plutonium. Particularly reactor 3 was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. They had 9 reactor cores stored at the top of each of the 4 buildings. They're all gone. Counting the reactor cores, that's 36 reactor cores. And each one of them was equal to about 100 Chernobyls because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium. Chernobyl's a graphite reactor. Chernobyl's brutal. It closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. 3,000 kilometers away. So it was brutal. They done sex ratio studies in Europe because of Chernobyl. So Chernobyl's nothing to sneeze at, but compared to Fukushima, it's like a paper towel. And suggesting for even a millisecond that was the worst nuclear accident, they should lose their college degrees for that one. What is the taser nuclear bomb and how it could destroy the entire Earth within a few hours? This is Indian media, of course. It was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. That's a plutonium bomb, by the way. It was a 50 megaton. And it wasn't 3,000 times stronger than the Hiroshima. It was 3,800 times stronger than the Nagasaki bomb, which Hiroshima was a uranium bomb, the only uranium bomb, I think, in history. Everything else was a plutonium bomb. if you plot over a large city, the 50 megaton bomba could completely obliterate everything within a radius of 35 kilometers, causing third-degree burns 100 kilometers away, and shattering windows hundreds of kilometers from the blast center. It was 700 kilometers from that explosion, the Soviet Union's bomb, where they actually blew out windows. The radiation covered the entire planet within a short period. It wasn't very long, it was like 20 days or something. Again, the single detonation, which had already happened, would inject massive amounts of radioactive particle into the atmosphere, causing widespread radiation poisoning, which already happened for all species, and contributing to what is known as a nuclear winter, dramatic cooling of the Earth's surface. That was a paper written by two so-called academics, and then that was seized upon by UN and used to bludgeon people into fear mode, right? Saying that if there's a nuclear, and there's been many nuclear wars. That's what nuclear testing is. It's the same bomb, the same radioactive fallout. We don't see the nuclear winter per se, right? Breakthroughs nuclear batteries could power weapons of mass destruction for 50 years. So a nuclear battery, I know there's a lot of people lives in denial out there about this. You remember the directed energy weapons when they were developing on a Boeing 737? So they had this laser beam directed energy weapon at the bow of that aircraft, right? And it was a father and a son, scientists, military scientists, that had developed it. They were working together. And they had done an interview where they were saying they had cartridges of nuclear isotopes that they would put into the bomb, but it would drain after about 20 minutes in order to achieve the megawatts they needed for it to have the properties the attributes that they wanted. And over the years, I've seen a lot of people come in and tell me that wasn't true, but what's the point of me saying it if it's not true? I've seen it with my own two eyes. You can deny it all you want. I've seen it with my own two eyes, that documentary. Now, whether they were honest or not, I don't know, but that's what they had said. I can't run an educational program by telling you lies. In a technological breakthrough that could threaten the United States national security, a Chinese company have begun mass producing tiny nuclear batteries that can last for decades. So there's this whole story, we've heard this and covered this lots and lots and lots. You got little dirty bombs running around everywhere. What else? So now they claim that this wasn't the U.S. actually created the world's first nuclear battery in the 1950s. No, they didn't. In the 1930s, the Soviet had over 1,000 lighthouses that were powered by nuclear. There's quite a few still left today. These are unmanned lighthouses, and they're powered, I think they're powered by strontium-90, was it? We covered a lot of these stories over the years. But I remember, because when they tell me in the 1960s, 50s, the United States actually created the world's first nuclear battery, that's simply not true. Israel denies involvement in the Bandar Abbas port explosion. This was in Iran. Over 500 people injured. Israel had denied its involvement. And there was conflicting stories where Israel had nothing to say, and then there's this story here where they allegedly denied its involvement, resulting in at least 4 fatalities, 500 injuries. That sounds about right for Israel, don't it? Israel has denied its involvement. Country's largest commercial port. Iran's going to flatten Israel's ports. Israel only got 1 or 2 small ports, and they're dependent upon those ports for everything. They're going to be gone on day one. At least 4 people were killed and over 500 were injured in the blast. Israel was quick to deny any involvement. Israel was not involved in the explosion of the major port, they told Channel 12 News, as quoted by the Times of Israel. So they had come out officially and denied. That's always their official story, isn't it? Although no one in Iran outright suggested the explosion came from an attack, Israel was quick to deny its involvement. So clearly they're suggesting, even if they didn't, they're trying to get credit for it by doing that, see? Oh yeah, no, we wouldn't do something like that. Well, they're carrying out a Holocaust in Gaza and Palestine. They shouldn't be allowed to use the word genocide or Holocaust anymore in Israel after what they've done to Gaza and Palestine, man. Israel's biggest fear is a nuclear-armed Iran. Well, they better get used to it. Because I can guarantee you Iran has nuclear weapons. I guarantee it. If they don't, they're going to look just like Ukraine. They got no choice. Which does not accept Israel's right to exist. Sure, Israel doesn't accept Iran's right to exist, or Palestine's, or anybody else's. So, whoopie-doo. The Prime Minister Polak, had previously said that the only acceptable deal would involve Iran agreeing to eliminate the entire nuclear program. Iran's not going to eliminate their program. She's a journalist. Look at a picture that she put up there where you can't even see her neck. You can just right just above her chin. Who does that? And why such a grainy picture? What's the purpose of that? China wants to claim the moon. That's simply not true. Beijing's nuclear reactors may outpace NASA's Artemis. And that story is the craziest story imaginable. NASA's, remember NASA, like when they first announced it, said, we're going back to the moon. And everybody started getting excited. And they came out with all these depictions of astronauts, and they're on top of this rocket, and they're heading up, and they're getting ready to launch, and then they're on their way to the moon, then they're at the moon. And then when they finally launched the alleged rocket, there was no astronauts. And it was on the dark side of the moon where nobody could even see them. Like, jeez. Hard cases. Then these people put actually water cooling. There's no water on the moon, but they put water cooling. They're crazies. And like we hear these connotations all the time. China, Russia, United States, Pakistan. They're going to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. It's all part of that propaganda machine of nuclear is the only solution for anything. If you cut your finger, you need a fuel rod shoved up your nose. And then they show you the stupidest depictions imaginable. Solar panels and boiling water reactors on the moon. But it makes you wonder, did the International Atomic Energy Agency write that story, right? Controversial Russian satellite involved in nuclear row spinning out of control. Controversial Russian satellite involved in nuclear row spinning out of control. China hit, I think, one of the United States satellites a decade ago with a directed energy weapon from the ground. Anybody remember that story? You really think that technology's gone away? But Russia launched into space shortly before the country invades Ukraine. So you can have any country where the technology hit one of the Russian satellites and blame it on the Americans. Cosmo 2553 last year became the center of the United States allegations Russians developing a nuclear weapon capable of destroying entire satellite networks. That's when they created the Space Force, right? Which is all about weaponizing space. And because my organization is anti-nuclear in space think tank organization, this is an actual think tank, right? This would include Elon Musk's Starlink internet system. So you can take out the satellite system, take out whatever systems you want. Of course you can. You know, if you blow up one of the satellites in space, in near space, I should say, you know, inside the radiation belt, if you blow up one of those satellites, because they're traveling at enormous speeds, then everything that explodes off it becomes a projectile, and when it hits something, it turns that into a massive hundreds of thousands of projectiles. When they hit something, they turn it into hundreds of thousands of projectiles. And if they start that, you never will be able to. Like, how are you going to get past the radiation belt? Is the big thing, right? They haven't conquered it. Right? There was lots of fake stories to try to get the upper hand, but ultimately the truth is well known, right? Cosmos 2553, Russia launched into space shortly before the country invaded Ukraine. Well, Ukraine was already invited in NATO. NATO was created as a deterrent for the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union was dissolved, along with everybody's pensions and patents, idiots, then NATO should have been dissolved too, because they became so powerful, you could never get rid of them. They're like a mini UN, right? They're a parasite on humanity forever at this stage. Cosmos 2553 last year became the center of the allegations, blah, blah, blah. I already covered that one. The Center for Strategic International Studies, a Washington-based think tank. Of course, the think tank got more credibility than anybody else on the planet. Not that they deserve it, but they get the credibility because they're the industry working outside of the government, right? Well, the government's not allowed to do something, so they create a think tank through suspicious funds, and then that think tank will make these suggestions. So therefore the government doesn't make the suggestions, the think tank does. U.S. officials suspect that while the satellite itself is not a weapon, they suspect that the satellite itself is not a weapon. But its suspect is linked to nuclear anti-satellite weapons, nuclear weapons. So, like, that's one part way down the story, was this part. But at the beginning of the story, they don't suspect the satellite as a weapon. Cal Thomas, take out Iran's nuclear facilities now. And look at the look on his face. We've seen this guy before. I know that look all to pieces. Yeah, one eye half shut. And just look at it, and just look at that look on his face, eh? Does that look like a journalist you want to go reading? Before basketball's 24-second rule, there was a tactic called freezing the ball. The team that was ahead would attempt to run out the clock by holding on to the ball as long as it could to deny the opposing team an opportunity to score. That looks like what Iran is again doing. So they're saying Iran is using delay tactics. They're all using it. It's all posturing. But creepy guy here. It is important for the U.S. to take Iranian leaders at their words, fail to do so and believe they will pull back on what some of their leaders have said is a religious mandate to wipe out Israel. Some of their leaders. I can show you endless government officials from Israel saying the same thing about Iran. The great Satan. Virtually guarantees the world will be faced with the greatest threats. The world. So they're saying that the world needs to attack Iran because Israel can't. Israel's never fought a real military, right? It's not going to last. It's not used to people shooting back at them. Right, the small resistance that we're seeing is wiping out the Israeli soldiers. It's absurd how many Israeli soldiers don't have arms and legs. That's after destroying Palestine, right? There's still resistance. If they had to go and fight a real army with navies and helicopters and drones and satellites and thousands of tanks and artilleries, and Israel will lose immediately. They have no experience fighting a real military. It's a coward military. Israel's a notoriously coward military. Writing for the publication from the Jewish world. New York attorney Eric Levine. We know Eric. Eric's a notorious pundit, pro-nuclear lapdog for Israel. He's another lobbyist hiding behind somebody's coattail. Washington has every justification to take military actions against Iran's proliferation efforts. Iran's nuclear threat is not a problem merely for Israel, but for the entire world. How is Iran a threat for the entire world? Israel, United States, Great Britain, which is not so great anymore, France has 48 military bases on Iran's border with nuclear weapons. Iran has said over and over and over, they don't... Like, if Iran wanted to attack Israel, Israel would be gone a long time ago. America has the wherewithal to eliminate this proliferation threat, would be politically and morally justified in doing so. Helping Israel defend Iran follows quite logically. Right? But this is just a lobbyist for Israel saying that. It doesn't criticize Israel as an instigator. The time to strike Iran's nuclear facilities now. Delay means we will likely have to face the nuclear-armed Iran with the ability to launch ICBMs at Israel and American cities. See that down over there? And American cities. And American cities. And so clearly he didn't write the story. One of the Israeli lobbyists wrote the story. He puts his name on it and lives a cushy life. We see that all the time, don't we? In Canada wants a community consent on nuclear waste transportation and burial. This is an interesting story. There's Canadian anti-nuclear groups, per se. Candidates, and I'll explain that in a minute, want community consent on nuclear waste transportation and burial. Responses came from, because we have an election right now, right? Came from Canada. Now, during the time with Northern Ontario candidates, there's 8 ridings, and they got responses from all the parties except for the Conservative Party, who did not respond to repeated requests, which is certainly no surprise to anybody. No nuclear waste in northwestern Ontario. Nuclear-free north. And Breenane Lloyd, we had her on the show one time after the Nuclear Waste Management Organization announced that they had picked a deep geological repository in Ontario, right? And we got her on the show, and she done an amazing job of articulating that. One of the organizers said there was a 40% response rate from the candidates, which she noted fell below the average voter turnout in federal elections of 66%. We really appreciate the candidates taking the time to respond to the questions. It's a busy time, and candidates are juggling many requests, and our sincere thanks go to those candidates who made this a priority, Lloyd said in a news release. And so they actually, the media actually covers them, right? But they won't cover me. My research expeditions for 6 years, for 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean when they're coming home. An alliance of Northern Ontario nuclear waste and burial lobby groups said all candidates that respond to its questionnaire support a community consent being a necessary precursor to site selection, a referendum, in other words. Oh, excuse me. We're disappointed that one party, the Conservative Party, did not reply. Reportedly, at the national level, there may be more resources than any other parties. But they are choosing to sit this election out in terms of participating in dialogues with the voters. It's not approach to a democratic process. Canada's a republic, not a democracy, right? Where everybody has the same rights. A democracy is where 51% can take away the rights of 49%. Rat infestation. This is just too appropriate. This one plant is going to cost $56 million US. Could be a decade or more behind schedule. And now they admit finally, but it turns out it's been going on for a long time. And rats love to chew insulation, and they love to chew on wires. They're attracted to it for some reason. And so I doubt if we'll ever see Hinkley Point start. They might build it, almost build it, but then they might have to give it up is basically what's going to happen. Like, and when they're talking about a significant rat infestation, that really doesn't do it justice either. Workers are complaining because they're being robbed. They're barely making any money because France, who's building it, is so far in the hole. A significant rat infestation with health and safety concerns. It's way beyond that. Despite assurances about the safety of nuclear, how can you assure that the integrity of the plant is there when you have a rat infestation in the whole site that is unprecedented? There's nowhere you can go, the workers are saying, where you don't see rats hanging out. There's nowhere you can sit down where there's not a rat within 10, 12 feet of you, sitting on there looking at you. And because they're going to have upwards of 11,000 people on the site, there's going to be food everywhere. If there's no food, then the rats are going to eat the insulation and the wires. There's a meltdown waiting to happen. High costs, other factors slow the development. In the past, EDF has been facing another problem at Hinkley Point C construction, a rat infestation. Yeah, because the rats don't have any species on the shorelines to eat. They're going up into these sites now. In recent months, workers have complained about poor working condition and low pay. They deserve all of the misery they can get, because that's all they're going to do ultimately is create misery, right? The union said that immediate action was needed as the rodents were everywhere. And the rapidly expanding rat population couldn't happen to more deserving people. It is expecting to support the creation of 15,000 jobs once complete. Don't believe anything they tell you. They're all over. You see them just sat there looking at you. It's worse near the canteens, where I guess it started. But they're everywhere now, another source said. The more men working on the site, the more rubbish is on the site, and the canteens are not clean either. It's just becoming worse every single moment. It's planned to launch in the early 2030s, following several years, a decade of delays and spiraling cost. However, many believe it's an unrealistic aim. So the early 30s is an unrealistic. 8 more years is an unrealistic aim. Even though the U.S. government has previously assured a public the TV show The Simpsons was wrong about potential rat infestation, because The Simpsons show that all the time, right? And how dare them bring the word Simpsons in any story? But because people are addicted to propaganda, and that's what Simpsons was and is, the U.S. government previously assured the public the TV show The Simpsons was wrong about the potential. Imagine you got to come out because of a propaganda campaign that backfires on you so significantly. That's nuclear. In March 2013, the Tokyo Electric Power Company suspected of rats. Not suspected it. They knew what happened. Rats, because they found all the rat poo, right? Have caused a short circuit in the switchboard, triggering the power cut. It was way worse than that. We covered it when it happened. TEPCO announced that it had found burn marks on a make TEPCO, which shouldn't exist and should be spelled in capital letters, by the way, because it's an acronym. Tokyo Electric Power Company. 15 centimeter dead rodent nearby. The outage shut down the cooling systems for 4 spent fuel ponds at reactor 1, 3, and 4. Like, what are you talking about? The fuel pools are gone from those buildings. There is no fuel pools at reactor 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's the media pretending they're at reactor 4 fuel pool, which is 150 feet above the building to your left. There's 36 reactor cores missing. I'm sorry, hang on. We're almost there, right? There's no fuel pools reactor 3. No fuel pools reactor 4. Number 1 and 2, we know for sure. We have more than enough evidence to support assertions. We can expect to see a massive nuclear renaissance in the coming years. We can expect to see a massive like you got the same gigawatts today as you did in 1996 or even earlier. Like I think you're 3 gigawatts, but you got so many reactors going offline. And the only reason you're holding that number is because you're giving everything an extension with a rubber stamp. The reality of it is workers, the people on the ground, in the UK have reported a significant rat infestation. That's the bottom line. There's the media's robot of Fukushima, but there's the real one. So it's about the size of your hand. Wow, I made it through. That's a tough show, this one tonight. That was long. That was a pretty big show tonight. That's all that matters. We made it through anyway. That's a win for us, right? I spelled Fukushima wrong. I fixed it in the thumbnail, but that's not enough. I knew this poll was going to bring in some controversy. And it's supposed to be because I didn't have enough digits, right? You got 100 digits to work with. Is it too late to stop the nuclear industry from destroying all the species from decades of radioactive fallout? My opinion is it is anyway. I don't know if I hope I'm wrong. That's all I can say. Just like anybody else, you should definitely hope I'm wrong. It was one of those days. We had heavy rain all day today. And James Lucid had put out a song last night, and I was listening to it when I was cooking up a video last night. And because you've heard the expressions, radiation like a banana, like a potato chip, like walking in sunshine, like climbing a mountain or flying on an airplane or peanut butter or in a canoe for 15 minutes. And these are all simply not true, right? So James kind of made up his own version of it. At the end of it, he kind of straightens things out in a song. I thought it was really clever. We're going to play that coming up in a moment. I'm going to play that coming up in a moment. So quite a lot of parts show up in the last week or something. James donated another almost $350, so I ordered a bunch of more parts. I think that's the end of it now. Till something else goes wrong. And so I'm looking forward to when I get healthy enough I can go out and start. It'll take a while for that stuff to show up, but that was a big deal to get that ordered in. I was like, do I go in and take care of myself, or do I get the parts? Because that's the same thing as taking care of myself. If I got the parts, I can fix things. I don't know, I'm struggling so much, right? And it's such a struggle. Everything is such a struggle anyway. But clearly, I was going downhill a couple of weeks ago. I was in pretty rough shape. So I'm doing much better. I realized that. So that's good news, right? I'm so very, very happy everybody was here tonight. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you so much for showing up. We're going to close the poll down. We're going to play... well, James got another song out. Holy shit, eh? I love it. We'll catch up to his last song. I was listening to that one last night, and I was like... I guess he had an epiphany or something, or he has some inspiration going on. And he was like... Because it really, if you're in this, if you know things about this industry, it's really annoying. It's really frightening in many ways. How the industry will equate really, really nasty stuff with harmless stuff, right? And I just thought it was a really brilliant. So unlawful successive disintegrations. He's got over 300 now, anti-nuclear songs. Still waiting for the main event. Oh. So we're going to play that, and I'm going to come in just at the very end of the video here, and I'll close the poll. So you can still get a vote in for the next 3 minutes. I got to set my timer so I don't interfere the song. I just got to remember to turn my timer on when once I start the song. Another thing I always do is I'll adjust the volume for you on my side. And what I mean by that is, you can see here, I'm going to just double check to make sure I'm high quality. Looks like we're in high quality. I'll get my big head out of the way. Hopefully, we'll see everybody tomorrow night. That's my intentions. Is always to get as many shows as I can in. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you all on the next show. Maybe tomorrow night, most likely, but we'll see.
Dragonflies gone from the shallow ponds. Winds cut sharper across broken farms. Wheat grows better behind walls of glass. Pine sap becomes more radioactive every day. Still they wait, stacking batteries. Still they wait, buying their warnings, waiting for a siren to sound. Missing the ground, breaking under their feet. Markets cry hunger, flashing plastic dreams. The fields thin where the roots won't take. Dana walks the empty forests, records the trees where no spider calls. No puffins rise from barren cliffs. No kelp clings to stripped reefs. Still they wait for what the world calls the main event. Still they wait for a storm that already passed. The fields absorb as carbon sinks. The streams ferry isotopes wherever they go. The forests lose the microbes that once defended. The coastlines wash away childhood memories. Still they wait for nuclear war. Still they wait for a powerful storm. While Fukushima breaks the chain, and no scientist dares to say. Still waiting for the main event. Still dreaming the sky will break. Still clinging to old parade songs. Still waiting for what already happened. It slips beneath the drinking wells. It bends the hills without a cross. Still waiting for the main event. Still dreaming the sky will break. Still clinging to old parade songs. No warnings, no rescue. Only the ocean closing the book.